Hi guys. So I started this up as a dare from a buddy of mine and my wife. They don't like to hear that I constantly ramble on and on and on about stupid things that stupid people do on occasions. And a lot of it has to revolve around my job, which is math tutoring, math teaching. And this is going to be a nice little outlet. And I hope that as I go, I'm going to give you guys certain tips and ideas on how to think about your child or your education and your child or your perspective on how education is run. So, I figured that because this is about Thanksgiving time, people are freaking out right now about midterms, and everybody else is freaking out about testing, especially if you're in college, high school, junior high, doesn't matter. Let's get something straight, shall we? First off, in high school, you get to see on certain websites like Aries or anything else that your school tends to provide a weighted grade. That weighted grade says, oh, my child's getting an A, my child's getting a B, or my child's getting a D. That drives tutors nuts left and right because the way that system is set up is if your child, depending on the system that you're using, was to stop taking the class as of this time, meaning that if everything was calculated in, this is what they would get. Okay, fine. Got no problem with that. Let's move on to the next part of that topic. So, your child is getting a C in the class right now. Great. You think that this child is going to keep getting a C and you want to know what they need to do for the rest of the term to get an A. Well, guess what? If you probably got a C by about this time, there's no real chance for you to get an A. So start looking at the worst case scenarios. And for that, you want to do something called a weighted average. Now, if I had more capacity and I had the time to do it, I'd probably start adding in little cards about here, here, and here. Weighted grades mean that as a whole, certain items are worth more than others. Take, for instance, certain online schools do 80% of your grade is worth your homework, participation, and other assignments. Okay, fine. That means that if you get an A on every single other item that's in the class apart from the test, and that's worth 80% of your grade, guess what? You just got an 80% of the class even if you didn't take any of the testing. Whoa, wait a minute. I got an 80% in the class? What do I need on my final to get an A in that case if the rest of my class is worth 20%? That would be about, let's see, a 50? Yeah, because 50% of 10 points in the class is, no, I'm sorry, 50% of 20 points in the class is 10. 10 plus 80 is 90. That's an A. College students get this more often than not. They think, oh my God, I'm going to fail my head off every time you get into November because they got a D on one exam and a D on another exam. In chemistry classes, what's worth the most? The labs. Okay, so labs are worth about 50% of your grade, usually, give or take. That means if you ace the lab, and then you get bare minimum on everything else, let's say you got 50s on the other 50% of your class, you still passed. 50% is the lab. Half of 50 for everything else. 50 plus 25, 75%, folks. That's the way that works out. So, let's talk about certain math courses. If your term is worth 4 exams, you don't get anything for participation, you don't get anything for homework, you don't get anything for anything else, just 4 exams. Okay, let's take a look here. If all exams are weighted evenly, all exams are weighted evenly, 4 exams, 100%, that's 25% per exam. So, you get an A on the first exam and you fail the next exam, but you still got half of it. Let's say you got a bare minimum 50% on your second exam. Let's see, 25 plus half of 25, that would be 12.5. Oh, you got 37% of the class fixed. That only means you need another 35%, or technically roughly about, let's see, 25 plus 12.5, that's 37.5. 37.5 minus 70, that means that the deduction in absolute value terms, you'd be missing roughly about 32.5%. 32.5% out of the remaining 50. That's roughly a C average, isn't it, folks? And of course, then again, usually what I do with some of my students is I do what we call worst case scenarios. People think that, oh my God, that means my child is going to fail. Not what it means. What it means is that if you want your child to get a certain grade, what is the bare minimum that they have to obtain on the rest of the weighted averages? Another problem with that topic. Teachers don't necessarily understand weighted averages as well as they should. So, I'm ranting on about how to get grades. Here's how you do it. If you're a teacher and you've got a weighted grade and you have no idea what that means, you're in trouble and probably shouldn't be teaching. But let's move on. A weighted grade is simple. Certain parts of the class are measured in a total amount. All classes are measured out of a total of 100%. Usually it's out of a point scale, but then again, if you take the ratio of points earned to points obtained, possible to obtain, then you got a possible 100%. Perfect. So, in order to do this, you have to look for individual classes. Look to see how your class is broken down and how much it is worth in total. Assume your child has a 0. That's the first step. Then you start breaking, and when I say child, I'm referring to the student, so I probably should say student from here on out. But let's assume that this particular student has nothing. Zip, zilch, zada, nothing. You take each weight or item in the class, and they have to say homework is worth X amount of points. They say tests are worth X amount of points. They say participation is worth X amount of points. And then figure out what percentage of that they earned. Then you multiply, you get a certain amount back, you add it all up, and boom, that's what your child has at this point in time if they weren't to do anything else. Now, of course, if the breakdown is a little more extreme, where it's just coursework and then tests, then you have to start scaling, okay, what do you think your final is going to be? And that's usually because a teacher really doesn't want to do an additional weighted test. They want, oh, well, if your child passed everything else and then they go into the last test, you're done. Fine. That depends on your school district, however, and this is where I'm going to sign off for the first video. If I get more subscribers, I'll try to do this a little better with different cards, because you notice me moving my hands. I'm setting this up for cards. But again, we'll see how this all works.